Welcome, everyone. First, I want to introduce a special guest we have with us here. Bob the pilot is back with us.
All right.
Brent, if you want to stand up and wave to your fans. He forgot he was Bob the pilot. We heard last night from a couple of people that the crowd really wants us to do another skit sometime. But I said, well, we've got about 12 hours or so until I came on. So I don't think we can put one together tonight. If you ever run into anyone that doesn't know who Bob the pilot is, just tell him he's a good pilot. That's all you need to know.
Well, Bob will tell you.
Yeah, he'll tell you. Yeah. Actually, we're gonna start looking through a few pictures here first. Several of Bob's accidents he's had over the years. He's got quite a lengthy claims history. All right, so here first, we have some tornado damage at Sun and Fun. Got a caravan flipped over here.
Jimmy would fly that out.
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna put it back over. Once it starts.
So true.
All right, here, looks like, judging from the tail, I think it's a Mooney that crashed into a boat here.
Did the same guy own both of them?
That
would be
would
suspect.
be,
Yeah.
that would be convenient.
Yeah, coverage on both vehicles with his wife in the boat.
He got a brand new plane and a new boat on this. Here's where a fire suppression system in a hangar. Actually, wasn't this year
It's not ground fog, huh?
Yes, I did have that happen.
Yeah. So this might not be the one, but those things do happen. This was done by turbulence during the descent.
Oh, man. Oh.
Looks like it, yeah.
Amazing, they could still fly.
Here's another King Air that crashed into a house. And here's one that seems to happen or happen all the time, but either a mechanic or a pilot doing an engine run up in a hangar, didn't have the wheels chocked, no brakes, open throttle, runs right into another guy's airplane in the hangar. I feel like I've seen this several times over the years. You wouldn't think it would happen very often, but it does. I had another guy who a guy was doing an engine run up in a hangar, and an older pilot was pushing one of those big fans across the hangar and pushed the fan right into the guy's propeller. So
On purpose.
yeah, on purpose. Yeah, he didn't like the guy very much. So what's the point of all this? Why am I showing you these pictures? It's that it can happen to you. It doesn't matter who you are. Bad luck doesn't discriminate. It happens to airline pilots, military pilots alike. We've had 20,000-hour airline pilots forget to put the gear down in their personal airplanes when they land, even though they've done it several times before, obviously. And you guys, you may have heard me say this before, but no one has ever called our agency to say, hey, I'm going to have an accident today. So
Then you deny the claim.
I don't know what type of guy you think I am. All right, so we're going to take a deeper look at some of these claims now, and we're going to talk about whether or not it would be covered, and if it's covered, which coverage on the policy would be the one to cover it. So here, you didn't check the weather, and you flew into a thunderstorm. You sustained hail and lightning damage. Are you covered for this? Anybody?
Yes, yes.
Think yes? You are correct. The answer is yes. Acts of God are covered. So lightning, hail, the tornado damage at Sun and Fun would all be covered. Now, if the hail damage is purely cosmetic and does not affect the airworthiness of the aircraft, it could be limited to a certain percentage of the insured value on your policy. All right. Your windshield cracks while you're in flight. What do you think? Is this covered?
Possible, but not likely. Possible.
I like the possibly answer. Who's that?
That just had this happen.
You've been talking to Sean too much. Yeah, the answer is, in fact, possibly. What's that?
What if
That would be covered. Yes, if it's caused by sudden or unexpected impact, like or a weather balloon strike, then yes, it would be covered. But no, if it's caused by stress or fatigue. So remember, general wear and tear, just like your car insurance, is not covered. If your engine fails on the side of the road, your car insurance, you don't file a claim for that. It's the same thing with the aircraft.
So you can tell whether it was,
How do you tell
I was
whether?
gonna say, how can you tell? Because you can say one thing, but what, can you prove it?
Got those?
Yeah, I mean, if something, first of all, if a bird hits your windshield, the bird's probably still going to be in there.
Yeah, it's true.
If you dive,
These were the feathers.
Yeah, the feathers or the blood.
if you were
We
diving
can
to
go
get away
some.
from the
We can
bird,
go get a chicken.
you might overstress.
There are labs that will review the windshield and determine how it broke.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
I saw that bird go by.
So
Yeah.
let's just say it's a new one and you suspect that it was installed improperly. There was something wrong with the installation. Happened right after a new one went in. Does it work like a car where you just subrogate and you guys go after the
Well, first
maintenance?
of all, I'd tell you to go, instead of filing a claim on your own policy, because if it was something that you didn't do, you don't want that claim or that black mark on
Okay.
your record. So go after the mechanic and tell them, hey, you're the one who installed this and it broke. I need you to file a claim on your policy and get this paid for.
Okay.
All right. Here, you served alcohol to a passenger on your airplane. After the flight, he's involved in a car accident. He kills another person. The victim's family sues you for serving him the alcohol. Any coverage there?
I don't think so. On your aircraft policy?
On your aircraft policy, yeah.
No.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Some broader policies out there, and I know of a couple of you out there that I do have this coverage on, includes host liquor liability. So the host liquor liability would be the coverage that would cover that if you have that on your policy. But again, that's not a guarantee. It's not on every policy, but something to check on your own. And of course, the coverage limit will follow your liability limit as well.
Jimmy, you got that, right?
Lance wouldn't sell it to me, I don't know why.
Believe it or not, Jimmy does have it.
Except when Don Smith rides with it.
Actually,
That's exclusion.
I didn't tell the insurance company how much alcohol Jimmy usually serves, though. So.
As long as I don't drink it, it doesn't matter. At least not Troy Land.
The fuselage is full of wings or alcohol.
Yeah. Speaking of Jimmy, this couple just bought an Aerostar from Jimmy. And, Jimmy took this picture of their first flight leaving his airport.
Everything they know.
I told him everything I know, and I still don't know much.
Yeah. In this example, let's say that you're the pilot in command, you let your friend take the controls of the aircraft and fly your airplane. He porpoises down the runway, damages the landing gear. You think you've got coverage for that?
Yeah, because you're not gonna tell.
I'm not gonna acknowledge that.
Probably not.
You're right on point there. Probably not. Most policies state it's a condition of the insurance that when in flight, the aircraft be operated at all times by either named pilots or pilots meeting the open pilot line. All right, here we've got you got a frayed wire and a blown tire. What do you think?
You're saying the tire got damaged by the wire or something?
No,
No.
these are two separate cases here.
Oh, okay.
Free wire, no. Tire, yes.
All right, it's going to be no to both of them. Tires are not covered unless caused by fire, theft, or vandalism. Now, if the tire blew on landing or takeoff and it caused you to veer off the runway into the ditch and there was structural damage to the aircraft, you would be covered for that, but not just the blown tire. And then, of course, again, for the frayed wiring, wear and tear, mechanical or electrical breakdown, failure, malfunction, deterioration of any component or accessory or part is not covered. All right, your airplane is going to be in the shop for repairs as a result of a covered claim, and you have several trips scheduled. Now you need to rent or charter another aircraft. Do you have any coverage for that?
Some policy.
Again, possibly yes, some policies, if your policy includes extra expense for renting substitute aircraft. And this one's a pretty common one. I'd say more common than the host liquor liability. I'd venture to say a good percentage of you out there probably do have this one on the policy. Here's a little bit more about the extra expense. This is just an example of the limitations. You're going to have a per day limit, a per occurrence limit. There's going to be a waiting period until you can claim, and then of course a maximum period you're allowed to claim. All right, extra expense, here's the definition of it on the policy. It means the cost of leasing or renting another aircraft which exceeds the cost you would have incurred if your aircraft hadn't been damaged. So what that means is you're only going to be reimbursed for the cost difference between the normal operating cost of your airplane and the cost of the rented or chartered like-kind aircraft. So only expenses that are over and above normal operating costs. All right, your airplane is damaged during landing away from your home base. Now you and your passengers have to stay in a hotel for the night and buy tickets on the airline in order to get home. Any coverage for that? Yes, if you have the trip interruption expense coverage. Again, it must be a covered occurrence that happens, and the insurance company will reimburse you for reasonable expenses for food, travel, and lodging of passengers from place of occurrence to your final destination or place of origin. And then here's another example of the limits they have there. There's going to be a per passenger limit as well as an occurrence limit. Okay, you have $50,000 worth of spare parts in your hangar. They get damaged or stolen. Do you have any coverage for that? And if so, which policy would cover that? It is true the hangar policy would be primary. Now, on your aircraft policy, there could be physical damage to spare parts coverage on there. That can cover engine parts, avionics, and accessories. But the spare parts coverage on your policy, on your aircraft policy, is going to be secondary to any other available policy. So, like you said, those of you who own your hangars, if you've already got a building policy or property policy on the hangar, you can get your business personal property, tools, parts, things like that included on that policy for very minimal charge. So if you do have that, that's going to be where the primary coverage comes from. All right, you depart your home base at 5 p.m. and don't arrive at your destination as scheduled. ATC lost radar contact an hour earlier and a search for your airplane begins. Any coverage for those expenses? Again, yes, if your policy includes search and rescue coverage. As usual, must be a covered occurrence. It's going to pay for the cost of the search and rescue, but only after governmental and military search and rescue operations have been discontinued. This must be requested by your estate as well, and it's going to carry a maximum limit that they're going to pay after the fact. All right, so with this one, this could be any number of different circumstances, but the one that comes to mind when I first saw this is I had a client who he had a dad. His dad also owned an airplane, and his dad was out flying around the beaches, checking out some bays, and forgot to switch the fuel over. Forgot to switch tanks, ran out of gas, ends up in a field like this. So, is fuel starvation covered? Basically, is the question. I think so. Yes. I would say yes. There's another thing you have in the insurance business. There is no stupid exclusion in your policy. So fuel starvation will be covered. Now, what about the cost of transporting the damaged aircraft to the maintenance shop? Yes, they will pay for that by the least expensive reasonable means, and the cost of the repairs plus the transportation costs can exceed the value of your aircraft on the policy.
Wonder insurance
Look, you buy all them things, God, you gotta have all those extras. You gotta have all them extras.
Actually, most of these extras are included for no charge. They just kind of throw it in to beef up the policy. This is kind of a way that they try to compete against other carriers when it's not only on price. You can look at the expansion endorsement and see just compare the coverages and, you can help make a decision that way. If they're almost the same price, maybe one's $25 more, but this one has search and rescue and all this other stuff on it, the other one doesn't, well, would you pay the 25 extra bucks? Probably. No, you wouldn't. All right, what if this same accident wasn't fuel starvation and it was an engine failure instead? Still covered? Yeah.
Hey, Lance, we talked earlier about someone, a mechanic writing on an annual that is airworthy except for, at that point in time, there won't be coverage if you floated an aircraft that was not airworthy and that was the cause of the accident. Would you have a take on that?
Well, give me a little more background on
Well,
that.
an example is a mechanic is not happy with an item and they write on there who's responsible. The pilot's responsible, but when it comes to a claim, if that was the fact, the mechanic says, don't fly this airplane, or I wouldn't fly this airplane for these problems, I'm not signing it off, and they fly it anyway. Airworthiness is part of the conclusion that you're saying the aircraft was airworthy when you flew it. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, without knowing the whole story, I think that there could definitely be an issue. It's possible. It depends on what caused the accident as well. What was the cause of the loss? But yeah, absolutely, airworthiness is required. It's going to be part of the requirements of the policy. So it's the same way if you let your aircraft go out of annual and have an engine failure. There's probably going to be an issue. But again, as the agent or broker, we don't make the final call on if it's covered or not, but just from what I know, yeah, there could be an issue.
Lance, what about ferry permits to fly in an aircraft that's not airworthy, but you do have a ferry permit to move it from another airport?
Yeah, and that's happened to me plenty of times, as long as you run that by the company first and let them know, here's the circumstances, here's what's going on, here's when the trip is going to take place, where the place of origin is, where's the destination, all that, and they approve it. Yeah, it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, so you're saying if you do have to get a ferry permit, like you somehow got out of annual, you get a ferry permit, take it to be worked on, call your insurance agent first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just make all of our flights ferry permits.
Cheaper.
Yeah, then you wouldn't have any more ambulances.
You would have to get an annual.
But then good people like Jimmy would go out of business.
We still got to do the ferry permit. Then we get him to fly it.
This same example, what if you either starved the engine of fuel or had an engine failure and you picked a field to land in, you landed safely with no damage or no injuries? Is there any coverage there?
Would you have to get the plane out of that field?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Just to move the airplane.
Yeah, the first answer is really what's to be covered. There's really nothing to cover if there's no damage and no injuries. But to get it out of the field, if the field is inadequate for a safe takeoff, the length of it, then if you have emergency landing expenses in there, the policy would pay for reasonable expenses to disassemble, remove, and transport the aircraft to the nearest airport for repairs. All right, this next one, this incident actually occurred on the first flight after an owner pilot safety conference just like this. So again, the main reason for this picture is remember that it can't happen to you and no one is exempt from bad luck. So everybody does a good job in this group, but just continue to take your training and your insurance seriously.
That plane ever fly again?
I don't know. I think this was Chris's, wasn't it, Brent? Do you know?
Yeah, that's a forward.
It is still flying.
Oh, it's fine?
I heard it did. Yeah, I have to keep it.
Up Spruce Creek. That's painful.
All right, so that's it for the claims side. Just want to touch on the market conditions.
Oh, sorry. Let's say you forgot to get your medical or you couldn't get an appointment for a couple of days, so you got like a couple of days expiration on your medical, which haven't been.
Yeah, again, it could be an issue.
What do you think? I just thought that.
Yeah, and again, it would come down to what the cause of the loss was. If you let your medical lapse and you had a heart attack, maybe that could be an issue. But if it was an engine failure or something that would have happened, even if you did have a good medical, then, that's a different story, so.
If you rent a hangar and, should you carry renter's insurance for the hangar? Does that have any effect on airplane coverage?
Well, your aircraft policy most likely has damage to premises rented on
Okay.
the policy as well. So
Okay.
if your airplane catches fire, and that could also be part of the premises liability as well. So if your aircraft caught fire and damaged the hangar, you should have a little bit of coverage on your policy for that. Now, as for the parts and pieces, again, that's where you need to get a property policy for that. Any parts,
Okay.
tools, stuff like that that's inside your hangar.
What about like a neighboring aircraft, that hangar burns down too?
Yeah, that would be on the premises liability as well.
Okay, great, thanks.
As long as, your aircraft was the one that caught fire and caused the others to burn down too.
Okay.
All right, so most of you probably saw the article that we wrote and had published in, I think it was the last quarter, Aerostar magazine we had. But, so if you need a copy of that article or you haven't read it, come to us and we'll get you a copy of it. But I just wanted to touch on this as well and figured it would also spur some conversation. But these are a few points of what we've been seeing just this year, really, and even more so in the past 6 months. The aviation market is continuing to harden. Rates are on the rise. There's less availability of higher liability limits, less underwriting flexibility on unique scenarios, and stricter requirements on pilots and training. So, more specific to the Aerostar, we did lose a carrier in Berkeley, but they were not an Aerostar carrier, so I don't really see that directly or immediately affecting you guys as much. But one of the other carriers, Old Republic, they used to only write the P models, or sorry, they didn't write the P models. They only wrote the non-pressurized Aerostars. Now, again, it must have only been 6 months ago. They've let us know they're completely off the Aerostars altogether now. So, Old Republic is no longer writing Aerostars. However, around that same time, we had a new carrier enter the marketplace, IAT Aviation. So a couple of guys from London Aviation left London Aviation, went over and started IAT, and IAT is going to be a good Aerostar market. Actually, Ken and Cody McCormick, the head over there, had a good conversation. Apparently, he really liked what Ken had to say. And, what's that?
He likes the Aerostar.
Yeah, he does, and Ken must have given him a good impression, because he's basically said, on the policies we've gotten with him so far as the training schools, he's pretty much said, if it's a school that is approved or endorsed by the AOA, then they're good with us. So that's big, I think, and that was a good move all around. Yeah.
Good start. We'd like to see them all underwriters adhering to that regulation, and that rule.
Yeah. We also had last year, we had Elevon, and I know I've got some of you with Elevon as well. Elevon is also another Aerostar market. They're a great company. They write on Allianz paper. So Allianz is a huge international company there, so that's going to be a good one as well. Their rates may be a little bit higher, but they've still been competitive on a number of Aerostars, depending on what the value is and pilot requirements and things like that. So that's all good news. I thought it was interesting. I carry a spreadsheet of all the Aerostar accounts that we have at our agency. And up to about maybe middle of 2016 or 2017, we had all of our Aerostars were either with W. Brown or U.S. Specialty. So even though other carriers would write them, those were the most competitive and have been for quite some time, so they've all been with them. Now, just in the past year or so, we've seen that now we've got a couple with Elevon and IAT in London, so it's starting to spread out a little bit more. So other carriers are kind of picking up the slack, whereas what we've seen out of W. Brown has been more so on the rates. W. Brown, and it's not just Aerostars, W. Brown has really been raising renewal premium up to 15% across the board on most all of our renewals. I don't know if I remember seeing one yet that didn't get that increase. So that's kind of been their main thing. Now, U.S. Specialty, I haven't seen as much rate increases, but One of the big things with them has been dropping liability limits down. So I know that I've had to move a couple of you because you were at 1 million smooth and they wanted to take you down to 1 million with the 100,000 per passenger. So I've only got a couple of guys on the Aerostar that they, for some reason, still kept that 1 million smooth. If you've got 5,000 Aerostar hours, you're probably going to be okay. But if you've only got a couple of hundred, they might drop you down from the 1 million smooth. So that's been the main thing I'm seeing with them. Both of those companies have been tightening up a little bit more on guys with fresh multi-engine experience getting into the Aerostar though. So that's been another change as well. So those are kind of the basics of just kind of wanted to let you guys know what I'm seeing. So any other questions on the market or anything else?
What about I heard that the plane now is 40 years old, and you think it's hard to get the million smooth, just for that reason.
Yeah, age of aircraft definitely is one we've seen, not only with trying to get those liability limits, but also if they raise your rates, sometimes their excuse is, well, now this aircraft is 40 years old, so we're going to start raising our rates. And so yeah, that certainly is a consideration for companies. Yeah.
Speaking of age, what about age of pilots? We've been seeing, where I'm at, some pilots can't get insurance now because of their age. We're talking about some guys that are in the, one guy's 78, the other guy's 79, and the insurance companies came out and said, no, we're not giving you insurance because of your age. Have you seen any decrease in age at this point on airplane, on general aviation?
Well, I've still got some guys who are in their early 80s. However, I would ask you too, were those pilots, were they already insured prior?
Yes.
They were? Okay. See, because I have seen on new accounts, you know, if a 79-year-old goes and buys an Aerostar right now, it's probably going to be a little bit tougher than if he had been with the same company since he was 75 or 70. So one thing we always try to recommend is once you get into your 70s, try to stay with the same carrier because they're more likely to renew you than going to another company where this company has not, it's a new account for them. So they may not be as willing to take you on at that point.
They've had the same airplane, been with the same company at least 6 or 7 years. This is important. What's your claim history? None.
Sometimes don't they just ask for a medical every year instead? That's what we.
They do that as well, yeah. I've had it happen to a couple of guys, not only annual medical, but also annual flight review too. Yeah.
Yeah, I got required medical every year and a recurrent.
Yeah.
What I tell new people when I join the association, they're looking for an Aerostar, get whatever ratings before the age of 70. Get some experience, get the airplane, and you'll be flying. That's the only way you're going to have coverage after the age of 70. It's a magic number. Whether I'm right or wrong, that seems to get their attention to decide whether, and most of the time, when we get calls from guys, it's on their bucket list, they're 75 years old. I tell them, boy, good luck. You know, I don't think you're going to find insurance.
At any price. At any price.
At any price.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple of buddies that they would insure them, but they said they wouldn't insure them in a twin, so it dropped down to a big single. And they didn't have a problem.
Do you have an Aerostar pilot who's just a VFR insured with you?
I've heard of that. Yeah, that's possible.
Because a friend of mine wanted to know, but he's only VFR rated, so can he get an Aerostar insured?
Oh, only VFR rated?
Yeah.
So he doesn't have an IFR?
Correct.
Okay, I thought you meant that the airplane wasn't IFR rated and he's only going to fly it for the plane. Yeah, no, I don't think anybody would take on, at this point with the way the market is, if you don't have your IFR, I can't really see you getting insurance at this point. So, I mean, even if you could, it's going to be a ridiculous amount of training and premium, so just go ahead and get the IFR before you buy the Aerostar. I mean,
How about new Aerostar pilots with no multi-engine rating? They're gonna get a multi-engine rating and buy an Aerostar. Can they get insured?
At this point, again, even 2 years ago, I would have told you, yes, we still had some companies who would do that, but one of the other changes, like I said, with W. Brown US Specialty is they're tightening up on that. They don't want their guys to have a couple hundred hours of multi-engine time now. They don't
I had a
want,
guy come looking at that plane for me, and I said, first thing you do before you go after it, make sure you get insurance.
yeah,
There's no use chasing everybody around trying to buy an airplane if you can't get insured.
yeah, those guys who just get their multi-engine rating and have 10 hours and go out and buy an Aerostar right away.
They're scared.
Well, it was always tough to do, but it could be done, and now it's really getting to the point where it's getting much harder to get those guys insured. So, go buy you an Aztec or something and get a couple hundred hours and come back in another year or so and go buy the Aerostar at that point.
And you need 25 hours, so if you buy the airplane, your first 25 hours is not insured generally.
No, they usually
Well, no,
have
if you-
a-
It's usually 25 hours a duel.
Or a rental.
Right.
Yeah.
Like a babysitter.
But
A mentor approved pilot.
most insurance does not allow training. Is that right?
Hmm.
Training.
Well, training for commercially, like you can't use your airplane if you're a CFI and you're just on a pleasure and business policy. You can't use your airplane and go make money and train other people. But if it's your airplane and you're buying it, yeah, you can do whatever training you want. Okay, you just can't.
So
you
recurring
can't charge
training is not a problem.
No.
Using your own airplane.
No.
It's a good thing.
With the market changing and the premiums rising, are you seeing a lot of subordinations rise as well from a legal point of view?
Is there, with the market changing, has there been an increase in subrogation on accidents? And I don't know that I've seen an increase in subrogation. Subrogation has always been there. It just depends on, who's at fault for the accident. So, I don't think I've seen really an increase in that, but it still does happen though.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I like what you said, but there's no such thing as a stupid exclusion. But I would just think that if somebody ran an airplane out of fuel that's on a subrogation, would probably.
Well, if it's your airplane though, they can't subrogate against the named insured, so they're not gonna subrogate against their own client. However, if you had a friend and he was on your policy, or he was flying under the open pilot warranty, and he took your airplane out and he starved the fuel and had a crash landing, they would pay you for your airplane, but then they could go subrogate against your friend.
Unless you had him on the policy.
Waiver of
as a
subrogation.
waiver of subrogation.
Right.
Then he's covered.
Correct.
On my airplane, I can use my airplane, as long as I'm in the right seat for flight training, but I've got to just notify my insurance agency and get it on file, hey, I'm gonna give a guy 10 hours of fuel in my airplane. And that's fine with them, as long as I notify them first.
Yeah.
There might be a couple of $100, premium or for 10 hours or whatever, and that's fine. But
Yeah,
I've
or
got
if you,
that set up.
if you had an instruction rental policy as well, all that's allowed. And you're a CFI and you've got a friend who's a family friend of yours and you don't plan on charging him, and you want to give him some instruction, that's different as well. The main thing is the commercial aspect of it. You can't make any money off of it.
In that respect, does letting that other person use your aircraft count as compensation? In other words, say, I'll go ahead and get you fuel in my airplane, but I'll make you a named pilot and you can use the aircraft? Is that considered?
No, and again, you're allowed in most policies, you're allowed to be reimbursed for fuel and oil and operating expenses like that. You just can't say, hey, I'm charging you $300 an hour to use my airplane. They can pay you for the fuel and you can let them use your airplane, but you just can't rent it out to, yeah, like that, so.
I'm just curious, how does the insurance industry determine how many hours are needed for a person to have driving type? I've seen insurance policies that come out, that said, you gotta have 25 hours. I've seen other insurance companies, same type of policy, but same company say 40 hours, I've seen others say 50 hours. And any idea on how they pick those numbers?
Probably on you.
Based
on-
on,
I
no,
would
no, no,
experience
no, I'm talking about, no, I'm talking about, when I renewed my insurance the last time, one policy came out, and it specified you gotta have 25 hours in type, one said 40, one said 50. I'm sitting there going, how did they pick those numbers? I mean, I got the time and the type and everything, but I was just looking at that and saying, wow, that's interesting.
Sounds
That's
like,
for a new
it sounds like you are
policy.
talking about the open pilot warranty then. If you're,
Yeah,
if you've already been trained and you've already got time in the Aerostar, they're not gonna put a training requirement on you of 25 hours.
But, well, it could, well, I guess in general, then, how would they pick out that time as far as the open policy, then? Each one seems to be different, even though it's the same policy, same company.
Yeah, it's really just company discretion. It's their appetite for the risk. You know, they basically, somebody higher up made a decision and said the open pilot warranty on the Aerostar is gonna require 100 hours make and model, and that's just what they go by. So, now as far as the training goes, sometimes that can be a little more underwriter discretion. So, two underwriters at the same company could require different training as well.
I wish they'd set them all at 200. That way that your friends don't ask you to borrow your airplane.
Can't help you, yeah.
You're on to something there.
Yeah.
I don't have to be the bad guy.
I'll put you in touch with the insurance companies now.
The underwriters. Okay, Lance, thank you so much. Michael, are you ready? We've got,
Tarzan here.
Oh, by the way, when I was told we needed to do another skit and that we didn't have time to do that, I was telling Larry about what I was going to talk about last night. And he goes, "Well, actually, that's pretty interesting. I think that'll be good." So I said, "Okay, well, that gives me a little more confidence."
Oh,
But
really?
Anybody who didn't like the presentation, Larry's going to be in the back taking complaints.
I started the conversation by saying, nobody wants to hear you talk.
I said, well.
Great, 'cause I look